This is Bob. Bob loves his new pet bed. His pet bed is very soft and he likes it to sleep. Hello and welcome to this video workshop where I will demonstrate to you how you can make this lovely soft pet bed in all sizes with all types of circular knitting machines. For this video workshop you need yarn, a lot of stuffing, a crochet hook. I like to use 5.5 millimeter. It's for closing the tubes, as I will demonstrate in the next chapters. Of course, your yarn needle, a pair of scissors, whatever machine you have, and an afternoon. It's a quick and simple project. It involves some simple skills. I will explain them all, but when you are already familiar with the type of skills, you can easily skip that chapter by clicking on the next chapter link here. Also, you can watch in the description of this video for a lot of helpful information and also the chapters. And you can also join my channel, and if you like my workshop you can give me a thumb up. And feel free to tip me, see for that information also the description of this video. In the next chapter I will show you the pattern for all machines. So hey-o, let's go and have a lot of fun. The pattern for this pet bed is basically the same for all sizes machines. There is a slight difference between the small and the bigger machines, and I will explain that, of course. I'm going to start with the big machines, the 40, 44, 46 or 48 needle machines. We are going to knit tubes with the use of scrap yarn, and we are going to close them also. And I will explain the quickest way after this pattern explanation. When you all are already familiar with my method, you can skip that chapter just by using the button on the left in the corner of this video, and you can go to the next chapter. Okay, for this example I'm going to use 2 colors. That makes assembling a lot easier. And I'm going to knit 2 tubes for the sides with color A, and they are 100 rows. 2 tubes, 100 rows, color A, and close them and leave the ends on because we need them for assembling. So I have 2 sides of 100 rows in color A. The cat already wants to use the bed before it's finished. So then I have knitted 2 tubes for the middle part, also with the use of the scrap yarn, and close them, leaving the tails on. And I have used, to start with, color B 25 rows, then color A 50 rows, continuing with color B 50 rows, color A 50 rows, and color B 25 rows. So I have to knit 2 tubes with those color changes and close them, and then they are ready for assembling. When you have a small circular knitting machine, like a machine with 22 needles, you can also make these beds. For that you have to knit the pattern twice. So instead of 2 tubes of 100 rows, you have to knit 4 of them. And for the middle tubes you can knit as many as you like, because that's for the width. So you can make 4, but you can make, no 4, yes, you can make 4, but you can make 5 or 6. That's not a problem. That will only make your bed wider. So, hey-o, let's go. Let's continue. And let's go assemble our cat bed, because my cats, there's also one, are waiting on their new bed. So You have to knit these tubes with the use of scrap yarn. I'm going to demonstrate to you how you can add the scrap yarn and how you can remove it very quick.
First, I'm going to start to knit with my scrap yarn a couple of rows. And then I'm going to change to another color of scrap yarn. I'm just cutting my yarn, putting it to the inside between the last and the first needle. And then I take another piece of scrap yarn and put it into my feeder, also between the last and the first needle. Make sure that the tails are long enough to reach the table. And knit one round, so every single needle has to pick the color once. I'm cutting my yarn and putting my tail between the last and the first needle, as every tail I have used. And then I'm taking my working yarn. I'm hanging a long piece of thread inside my machine because I'm going to use it to pick up my stitches and do whatever I want to do with them. I'm going to demonstrate to you how I like to close my tube. But first, you have to put your yarn between the last and the first needle. And then you are going to knit. So what have we done? We have started with scrap yarn, changed to another color and knit one round with scrap yarn. And now I'm just knitting my desired pattern. That's not interesting because that's for a special project. And now I'm finished. I'm cutting my yarn a long piece because I want to use it to close my tube. I'm taking it out of the feeder between the last and the first needle again. And then I'm going to put my scrap yarn into my feeder between the last and the first needle, and I'm going to knit one round. See, just the same place all the time between the last and the first needle. One round, so every needle just picks the yellow color in this case one time. I'm taking it out of the feeder and I'm taking another piece of scrap yarn. And I'm going to knit a couple of rounds with the scrap yarn. And after knitting a couple of rounds, there are no rules. I'm just cutting my yarn and knitting until my work drops from the machine. So I'm continue cranking when my yarn runs out until my project comes loose. Now I'm going to demonstrate how I'm going to close the tube. I'm going to close the tubes with the use of my 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. It's 5.5 millimeter. You can search for your size in your country. Tubes have two ends, the casting on and the casting off end, and we are going to start with the casting off end. I'm turning the inside to the outside and I'm going to show you the last knitted stitches with my working yarn that are captured between the scrap yarn. And when you put all those ends to the right, you will find your working yarn and you will find those two yarn tails of that single strand row. So those three ends we need. You see that the working yarn is in the middle and the yarn end closest to you goes into the first stitch we need to close the first pair. So I stick my needle through that last stitch and to the first stitch. Look. The working yarn is in the middle and those two yarn tails are coming out of those two stitches. And when you look at the rest of the stitches, you will see that you can line them up easily into pairs. I'm putting my needles into all the pairs so you can see how it looks like. And this way you can see if you're doing it correct, because a tube with 22 stitches has 11 pair stitches. So I have to check if I have 11 pair. If not, I made a mistake with picking up those first pair, those first 2 stitches. Now I'm putting my needle into my last pair. Those are next to each other, but also in front of each other. And now I have 11 pairs. And I'm ready to close the pairs. So I'm sticking my crochet hook into that first 2 loops and I'm taking my working yarn. And with the hook, I'm going to pull the yarn through the 2 loops. And now I've started closing my tube. I'm going to pick up the next pair, pulling the yarn through all 3 loops on my hook. From now on, I have 3 loops on my hook every time I'm going to close a pair. And I'm going to close all 11 pairs. And my last stitch, you always end with a pair. And then I'm pulling my yarn another time through that single loop and the tube is closed. You have the scrap yarn tails on the right. I'm turning so that my working yarn is on the right, and now I'm going to pull out that single row with scrap yarn. That easy, and you can lift off the rest, and now this side of your tube, the end is closed. And now we have to close the beginning of the tube, and that first stitch is a little bit more difficult to find. The hidden stitch is easy to find, but most people make the mistake by not searching for it, so they look at the loops and they think that this stitch is the first stitch and this is the opposite stitch, but it's not. You have to look at where your scrap yarn goes through. Find the first 2 loops where the yarn ends of the scrap yarn go through. And then you will find that the piece closest to you, that stitch, is a little bit hidden. This is the first stitch and the opposite stitch, and the working yarn is in between. And when you're not sure, you are going to count your 11 pairs. Again, line them up. And my last pair, you always end with a pair. And then you continue closing as we did at the end of the tube, exactly the same way. When you are getting used to this, you don't need all those needles anymore. They are just for learning purpose. And sometimes I make also a mistake and I don't end up with a pair. And when I don't end up with a pair, I made a mistake. So I have to undo the closing by just pulling out those stitches and start over again with finding the real first pair. And then you close it the same way. Now we are ready to assemble and we are going to join the longest tubes to each other. I have knitted 2 tubes. Maybe you have knitted 3, so you are going to join 3 tubes then. I show you how to join them to each other. Make sure that the tails are on the outer edges. And you are going to use just yarn that's still like this. I don't cut it because then I always know I have enough. I make sure that I pull a piece that's longer than my tubes, and then I'm going to start joining them. I have my yarn in my yarn needle and I'm picking up the tube and I'm going to join them all the way along the edge to the end. So it's just one long piece then. It's just the same as joining a blanket. First I'm going to look up at the edge, the side of my tube, and I am going to find the row with the V-stitches. Along the side of the tube there is just one long row with V-stitches. See? And that goes on and on all the way to the end. And we are going to use those V-stitches for joining V-stitches. They are formed like this in one long row, and when you look closer you'll see those bars. We are going to use those bars that are basically the point of the V-stitch to join to each other. I'm going to pick up the first bar of the second tube. So I'm going to find the V-stitches on the edge and I pick up the first bar. This is just to connect them to each other. And now we are ready to join them. And that's really simple. We are following the V-stitches and we are going to stick our needle in where my yarn came out to go to the other side. And I pick up 2 bars. 2 bars, just like this. So you go in where your yarn came out to go to the other side. It's a big hole, so just use the holes. Don't stick your needle through the yarn because then it won't work. And then you go to the opposite side, do exactly the same. Where your yarn came out, you go in and you pick up 2 bars. And then you pull at your yarn. Don't pull it tight. Leave a space between the tubes. Then you can do this very easy. When you pull it tight, it's more difficult. So go in where you came out and pick up 2 of those bars. And make sure you stay in the same line. It looks like sometimes that your tube is twisted, but it's not. Just twist it back so you can stay on track in the same row with V-stitches. And continue picking up 2 bars. Stay in the V-stitches. This goes really quick and continue until you reach almost the color change. I'm almost done. I'm looking how many gray bars I still have. That's 4 bars.
And on this side I have 5 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes. Maybe I made a mistake, but I can smuggle. So first I continue picking up 2 stitches, and when I'm almost at the color change, I'm going to pick up 1 by 1. Here I have 3 left, so I pick up 2. And now I'm going to pick up the last gray ones on both sides and continue picking up 1 purple one. Yes, and 1 purple one on the other side to get a smooth color change. And then you continue picking up 2 bars at a time until you reach the next color change. Continue joining like this all the way to the end. So color change, go all the way to the end. But first I have to pull at my working yarn. I'm going to pull it all the way as I measured. Make sure you don't get tangled with the other tails. Pull it through to the point where you say it was long enough. And you don't have to pull through that piece anymore. I don't cut my yarn yet because maybe it is too short, to be sure. And now I'm going to continue joining and pulling till I am done. I'm almost at the end. I've joined my tubes all the way and I'm going to make the last stitches. I go as far as possible. Maybe you have to smuggle a stitch, but go as far as possible. And this is finished. When you have a third tube, join that also, and when you're finished, you're ready to continue. Now you are ready for the next step, and you are going to look what the best side is and put that on the table, wrong side facing you. I have to cut my yarn, I forgot it, so I have to do that now. Okay, so you put your work on the table, wrong side facing you, then you fold it like this, and then the good side is facing you. Turn your work and make sure that the yarn is untangled. And now we are going to join these sides to each other with the use of the yarn at the edges, at the corners. It has to be a bit longer than the length we have to close. We are going to close these 2 sides to each other as nice as possible. It's basically the same as this joining, but different. We are going to use the tail, and where it is, we are going to start at the other side, and we are going to use the V-stitches. So we are going to find our V-stitches. Now we know how they look like. And we are going to find the first one at the top corner in the V-stitch. Go under the V-stitch of your tube. Try to use the V-stitches that are just under the edge. Oh, this is the wrong side. My yarn tail is on this side, so I have to start on the opposite side with the first V-stitch, picking up the V-stitch at the corner, pulling through the yarn, and then I'm going back to the first tube and I'm picking up that first V-stitch. Make sure your yarn don't get tangled. A V-stitch on this tube, keep a space in between and continue picking up the next V-stitch. and keep continuing picking up V-stitches on every tube. And this is basically how you close this. When you have done a couple of stitches, you can just pull at your yarn and when you pull, the tubes will be pulled to each other and have a very nice closure. This is going to be the bottom of your pet bed, so when it's not that nice, it doesn't matter. Continue this all the way along, including the middle. It's just picking up those V-stitches. So where you have joined your tubes, you will also just pick up those V-stitches. We're at the point where we joined the tubes and you just are going to pick up the V's. Maybe you have to search a little bit, but you will find them. And continue just as it is one tube. And when you pull at your yarn, you will see that it will close very nice. Here is where the tubes are joined, but this is the bottom, so it's not a problem if you see it a little bit. I'm almost done. I go as far as possible. Maybe I have to smuggle a little stitch, but that doesn't matter, nobody will notice. And now our tubes are joined like this, and we are ready for the next step. But first we have to secure some pieces of yarn. When you go to the inside, in the center you will find a couple of ends and you just join them together with a knot. And leave the ends on the inside, and then you have the yarn end you just used to close this into a circle, and you just secure that yarn end and pull it through and put it also to the inside. And now we are ready for the next step. And for that, I'm going to leave my yarn like this, because then I always know I have enough, and I'm going to make 2 tunnels. I'm going to close this into a tunnel, the purple part. And I'm going to do that with the use of V-stitches. I'm going to explain it to you. First, you have to line up your edges. And I'm going to use the V-stitches. I'm taking my needle and I'm going through the V-stitches of color A or color B. It doesn't matter as long as you continue in that color. I'm going through the V-stitches on the edge. I'm going in on both sides. Just to join them. And now they are joined. And we are going to make the tube. For that I'm going to use the V-stitches. I'm going to poke through the V-stitch to the V-stitch on the opposite side. I pull through my yarn. Don't pull it very tight. And then I'm going to poke through the next V-stitch, through all layers, through the next V-stitch on the opposite side. And then I'm going to go through the next V-stitch, through the next V-stitch on the opposite side. And I'm going to continue poking through the next V-stitch, through the next V-stitch on the opposite side. And this is what it is to make a tube. You do this all the way to the other side. Make sure you go through all V-stitches. You will become handy after a few. Continue doing this all the way up, and then I will show you how you go down. But first you have to go all the way up, continuing exactly the same. When you pull at your yarn, you can just pull it through and your tube appears. I'm at the end. I'm going through both V-stitches. I'm making sure that my tension is correct and that the yarn in my needle is long enough to go all the way back. So for going back, I'm going to poke through the same holes but the opposite side. I'm going along the edge to the other side, poking through. And now I'm going to do exactly the same and stitching the stitches that aren't stitched yet by going through the same holes we already ran through, and now we are going to stitch it completely closed by continuing doing this all the way to the end. I hope you understand how it works. So continue and do the same on the other side. And then I see you back when you have made those 2 tubes. In the next step, we are going to add the last 2 short tubes to the sides of our pet bed. I'm going to start with the first one, so put aside the second one. I'm going to show you how you can join this tube so that the stuffing will be going through the tubes as if it's one tube all the way around. We are going to put in our stuffing later. First we are going to join this tube, and for that I take a long piece of yarn. Take it twice as long as your tube, so you have enough to work with. When we are continue the assembling, we are using the vertical bars that are hidden under the V-stitches again. So you have to find the V-stitches on the edge of your project, and you will follow those tracks all the way from top to bottom. So we are going to use them on the middle piece, and we are going to use them on the tube we are going to attach. Okay, it looks complicated, but it's really not. First we are going to close this small part. So I have my yarn in my needle, and I'm going to take the big part of my pet bed, and I'm going to find the top vertical bar here. I'm pulling through my yarn, not all the way because I need a long tail. And then I take the new tube, and there I am going to find the first bar at the corner. And I pull through the yarn also, not all the way. And then I pick up 2 bars at the side that's closest to me, and 2 bars of the tube I'm going to attach. Just the same way, 2 bars at a time, and in the middle there is the other side, the bottom side of the pet bed, and you just leave that where it is. We are going to join that later in the next step, but now you are going to continue picking up vertical bars going in where you came out. It's just the same stitch as we did before until you reach the yarn color change. I'm filming this real time so you get an idea that it's not very time consuming to do this, because before you know it, it's finished. The first one takes a little bit time because I have to explain, but the second one goes twice as fast. Never pull at your yarn because that makes it more difficult to see your stitches, your V-stitches. We are going to pull at our yarn later. Continue as far as possible with your same colors, and the moment the color changes, you have to stop. There it is. Make sure the longest piece of working yarn is on your needle, and the shorter tail has to be twice the length we just joined. I'm going to put that short tail into my needle. I'm pulling at both ends of the part I just joined. It closes seamless, and then I flip over the tube I'm joining to the front. I fold it over, and now I'm going to do exactly the same as I just did. I already attached my yarn because I did that when I started to join, and now you can create a tube the same
way by just joining those two sides to each other. So this is the tube I'm joining, going that way, picking up the first bar at the corner, and then continue at the opposite side, going in where I came out. And I'm going to pick up also one stitch because it's just the beginning, and then continue picking up 2 stitches a time. The cat is already going to sit on the bed before it's finished. And on the right you see also the black feet of Samson. It's my black cat. I have 4 cats and they are all patiently waiting until the bed is finished. Continue joining until you reach the color change. I'm almost there, so I'm picking up the last stitches, and now I'm going to pull at my yarn, not too tight, but just exact the same tension. And now you have created a tube that goes around the corner. It's open and it's seamless. The open ends, we are using the yarn that's hanging after stuffing. And now we are going to close the middle part and creating the tube in one step. It's very simple, a little bit fiddly. You have to do it on a flat surface and it's not complicated, but I will show it to you. You use the long piece of yarn, you close it all the way with the same piece of yarn, and I will explain how you have to do it and of course show it all the way. Okay. We continue where we ended and we are going to use the vertical bars on the tube we are attaching. We are going to do that on both sides, but in the middle, in between, we are going to poke through the 2 layers of the middle of the bed. So I'm continuing just the same way, picking up those bars. And per 2 bars, you are going to stick your needle under the V-stitches of the sides of the tubes that are the middle part of your pet bed. Don't pull your yarn very tight, and then you go to the back part of the folded tube and continue picking up 2 vertical bars there. So, and then you are going to go through the next V-stitches of those 2 layers of the middle piece. Follow the same tracks. You go from the back to the front through 2, and then you go to the tube and go under the next 2 bars. So basically it's the same, only between the bars you go through both layers. Every time you go to the next pair of V-stitches, follow the same tracks, always follow the same tracks. It's so simple. You are going to close the tube from back to front as you always do, but now you go also from back to front and from front to back through the V-stitches of the layers that has to be in between. From front to back, pick up 2 stitches at the back. from back to front. Pick up 2 stitches at the front. From front to back. Pick up 2 stitches at the back. When you pull at your yarn, your work will close very, very nice. But it's not handy to close it before you are finished, because then you cannot see where you have to work. But it closes very, very nice. So continue picking up bars, going back and front, and go through V-stitch pairs. Every time go to the next pair and pick up your bars. So from the front to the back, pick up 2 bars at the back. From the back to the front, pick up 2 bars at the front. From the front to the back, pick up 2 bars at the back. So always go back and forward. Make sure you do that. Bob is checking if his bed is ready, but it's not. Continue until you reach the color change. There will be a moment that you will find the part where you have joined the middle part of the bed, but just continue. Don't overthink. It's just following the same track and doing exactly the same thing. Now I make a mistake, so I just pull it out and continue. From the back to the front, pick up 2 bars at the front. From the front to the back, pick up 2 bars at the back. Make sure you stay at the same row V-stitches. Always follow the same track. In combination with the easy close 1 second remove scrap yarn method, this will always work when you follow the same track. Pull at your yarn at the end, but it's always magic when you do that. Look, just pull at your yarn, easy and nice. And it's magic what happens. Look, the middle part is in between and it's closed very nice in just 1 move. So, but I have to continue. When you have pulled at your yarn, you have to look very carefully that you start at the correct track. So that's why I always leave space. Here is where I have joined the back. Now I just continue doing exactly the same thing and pick up the pairs that I can find or that look like a pair. You can smuggle, so it's not a problem. It will be invisible. This is really magic. Continue going back and forth until you reach the color change. Bob is also checking. He wants to use his Petbed. But I have to finish it first. But it will take me, I think, about 60 minutes max to finish it. From here. Or maybe faster. Go as far as possible. Until you reach the color change. I'm almost there. And then close it by just pulling at your yarn. And then we are ready for the next step. We have made a tube and joined the middle, and now we are going to join this part the same way we did it on the other side, by just following the tracks and picking up 2 bars at a time. Just continue where you're finished I'm going to stick through the last V-stitches. And then I just continue going back and forth, picking up 2 bars at a time to the top or to the end. Just continue on the same tracks. Stay on track. My last stitch, I'm going to pull at my yarn, and now the tube is joined on this side. I flip my work and I continue joining this piece. I finished here. I just continue on the middle part and I pick up the first bar on the edge of the tube I am connecting. So I pick up the first bar at the corner. The yarn tail of that tube I'm going to use to close it at the end. And pick up 2 bars until you are at the color change. I'm done. I'm pulling at my yarn, making sure the tension is correct everywhere. And then I'm finished with this side. Later I will put in stuffing, but first I have to add the last tube. It's going to be added exactly the same way, but before you finish it, you have to add stuffing or padding if you like. So before closing it all the way, you have to put in whatever you like. I'm not going to put in something because it's already 4 layers from itself, and I'm going to add stuffing in the tubes all the way around. So continue joining the second one and then I see you back. I have joined both sides and I have still the 4 open corners that I will use
to put stuffing in. But first I have to put away the yarn tails on the back. Those ends I'm going to knot, just simply knot them on the corners and put them to the inside. So I will demonstrate one. I'm going to stick my needle under a stitch or two. I make a little loop around my needle and I pull that tight. I keep it in place and I pull through the needle with all the yarn, and there is a very secured knot now, and you can just put your needle to the middle of your project and pull through the yarn and cut off the longest tail, and continue doing that with all those yarn ends on the bottom. And I'm finished. Now I'm going to continue with the last step. I'm going to put stuffing to the inside and I'm going to close the corners. I'm using a head pillow from IKEA for stuffing. It's called Scald Blood. It's about €2 in Europe. And I cut it open and I'm going to use the stuffing on the inside. It's light and fluffy. And I'm just going to put it to the inside. Try to stuff as even as possible. You have to stuff it firm, but not that firm that your work will stretch. Your knitting has to stay in shape, but it has to be stuffed firm. So you have to find out yourself how much stuffing you want to put in. Now, I'm going to do this. Take your time. The more effort you put on putting it in place, the better it will look. I'm going to pull out because I need a lot of the stuffing. As you can see, I can stuff both sides all the way up to the corner. Make sure your yarn tail doesn't go to the inside because we need it to close that corner. And when you think you have enough, you can start closing that corner, and I will demonstrate to you how you can do that as seamless as possible. Put the yarn tail in your needle and put your work so you can work easy with it. We are going to close these sides to each other, making sure that the rib is on the inside. I'm going to start with picking up the V-stitch that's going all the way up at the corner. You can see the V-stitches, they are just lined up next to each other, and you are going to find your first V-stitch. They are just next to each other, and it has to be just under the edge. So I'm going to put my needle under the first V-stitch, and then I'm going to go at the other side also under the V-stitch that's at the corner of your tube, just under the edge. And then you go back to the first side, pick up the next V-stitch, and on the opposite side also the next. You are always going to pick up the second stitch with the V shape. When you continue doing that, everything will work out fine. Don't pull your yarn tight, we do that later. We can also put some stuffing in if we like or need to do that. But start closing at least the half of the opening. Look, it's look like bars, and when you pull it, it will close as seamless as possible. I have to put in some more stuffing. You cannot reach this when it's closed, so put in enough stuffing so that the corner will be filled with stuffing, and continue closing as far as possible. Make sure there comes no stuffing out of it. Find your last V-stitch and then pull at your yarn so it will close. Very nice. And then when all the tension is okay, you just simply knot the yarn tail and stick it to the inside. Let it come out somewhere. It's gone. There it is. Bring your corner back in shape and cut your yarn. And continue stuffing all the way around and close the remaining 3 corners. The same way. and just knot the last corner. Tuck away the tail and cut it, and the pet bed is finished and ready for using. So let's see how long it takes for one of my cats will find it. And it took Bob less than 2 minutes to find the bed. If you like this workshop and want to follow more of my free circular knitting machine workshops, just look in the description of this video. There is a link to a complete list with all the videos that is always up to date. You can also join my channel and feel free to tip me. See also the description of this video. The rest of this video will show all kind of projects where I have free workshops for in one playlist. I say thank you for watching. Stay safe, with love from Holland. Bye bye.